The transmission came through the static like a dying breath, barely audible, but real. For years, space explorers had whispered about Earth, the forbidden world where no expedition ever returned. Officially, it was labeled uninhabitable. Unofficially, it was something far worse. Every attempt to uncover its truth ended in silence. Yet tonight, a new crew stood ready to defy the warnings and uncover what really happened on humanity's lost home. They believed the answers were buried in Earth's soil, waiting to be unearthed. But what they would find would make them wish they never came at all. The mission began with quiet confidence. From the orbiting vessel, the planet didn't look dangerous. It was breathtaking. A swirl of blues and greens glowed beneath a thin veil of cloud, peaceful and still. Centuries had passed since humanity abandoned Earth, fleeing after the collapse that turned it into a scarred, haunted relic. But now, after generations of exile among the stars, people had begun to wonder what became of their birthplace. The silence had become unbearable. Curiosity won over fear. The team consisted of 5 explorers chosen from across the colonies. They weren't soldiers or thrill seekers, but scientists, historians, and engineers driven by one simple question: why had no one returned? Their leader, a calm and steady figure with weathered eyes, believed Earth still held answers to humanity's past, and perhaps its future. The others followed for their own reasons: knowledge, redemption, or the promise of making history. They didn't know that history was about to repeat itself. Their descent through the clouds was smooth at first. The ship's hull trembled as they entered the atmosphere, sensors flickering with erratic readings. Radiation levels were higher than expected, and magnetic interference cut off long-range communications. Still, they pressed on. Below, the outlines of continents emerged: overgrown cities, twisted ruins, and forests reclaiming concrete wastelands. The planet looked alive again, but not in any way that felt welcoming. They landed in what used to be northern Europe, according to the old maps. The air was thick with mist, and the ground pulsed faintly with heat. Strange vines crawled over shattered highways and buildings half swallowed by the earth. Every structure seemed to hum quietly, as if the planet itself was whispering. Instruments went haywire the moment they stepped out. Compass needles spun endlessly. Electronic devices malfunctioned. Yet, in the distance, they spotted something that froze them in place, a faint blue glow seeping from beneath the ruins. Curiosity overpowered caution. They followed the glow, moving through silent streets covered in moss. Statues lay toppled, faces eroded by time. Faded signs in old Earth languages hung crooked on rusted poles. The world was both familiar and alien, like a memory half remembered. Every step echoed against the stillness. It wasn't until they reached the heart of an ancient city that they realized the glow came from underground. Something was buried beneath the old world. With the help of ground scanners, they located what looked like a massive structure beneath the surface. The readings didn't make sense. It pulsed with energy that predated even the collapse. They decided to dig. As they cleared the debris, the ground trembled slightly, releasing a low vibration that made their bones ache. One of them thought they heard faint voices. Others brushed it off as interference. Still, the unease grew. After hours of excavation, they uncovered a smooth, metallic surface, unlike any material known to the colonies. Symbols were etched along its edges, intricate, geometric, almost alive. When they brushed the dust away, the symbols shimmered faintly, as though responding to their touch. The leader ordered a scan, but the equipment shorted out instantly. The air grew colder, heavier. Something beneath was waking up. They found an entrance, a sealed hatch, perfectly preserved despite the centuries. The team argued about opening it. Protocol demanded they wait for authorization, but the signal back to orbit had been lost since the first landing. They were alone, disconnected, and beneath their feet lay the one mystery that could change everything. Against their better judgment, they decided to open it. As the hatch slowly lifted, a surge of air escaped with a deep, resonant hum. Lights flickered within the opening, revealing a tunnel leading down into darkness. The walls were lined with strange organic patterns, part metal, part stone, pulsing faintly like veins under skin. It wasn't a bunker. It was something older, something not entirely human. They entered cautiously, flashlights cutting through the thick, shifting mist. The deeper they went, the stronger the humming grew. The sound wasn't mechanical. It felt like a heartbeat, slow and rhythmic. Symbols along the corridor began to glow brighter, responding to their movement. One of them pointed out that the designs looked almost biological, as if the structure itself was alive. The leader dismissed it as an illusion, though his voice wavered. No one spoke after that. At the end of the tunnel, they found a massive chamber filled with what appeared to be machines, towering constructs covered in vines, still humming after centuries. In the center was a circular platform surrounded by crystal-like pillars, emitting a low blue light. The ground was covered with dust, but when one of them stepped forward, the dust parted, revealing a massive symbol carved into the floor. None of them could recognize it, but it stirred something deep in their minds, like a forgotten dream. They began to record everything, sending notes through their local comms even though there was no signal beyond the atmosphere. They speculated it could be a preservation vault, perhaps built by the last generation before the collapse. But one of them noticed something strange. The machines weren't decaying. They were growing. Tiny filaments extended from the metal, reaching toward the explorer's boots. Panic set in when one of the crew touched one of the pillars and the light flared violently. The hum grew louder and the ground vibrated. The symbols along the walls rearranged themselves, shifting like living script. They ran for the tunnel, but the entrance behind them had sealed shut. Alarms in their helmets screamed warnings: radiation, biosignature anomalies, rapid energy surges. Then the power in their suits died. Total darkness. Only the faint blue light remained, pulsing slowly like breath. In that light, shapes began to move, shadows forming along the edges of the chamber. They looked human, but not quite. Something about their movements was wrong. Too fluid, too synchronized. The explorers froze, realizing they were no longer alone. A soft voice echoed from the dark, speaking in a language none of them understood. Yet it sounded hauntingly familiar. The leader whispered that they had to record it all, that the truth had to reach the colonies, even if they didn't make it back. But the voice grew louder, clearer, now echoing inside their minds, rather than through the air. The ground split open beneath the platform, revealing an abyss filled with light and movement, like a world breathing beneath the world. Something was waking up. The last thing they saw before everything went white was the symbol on the floor glowing bright enough to blind them. It pulsed once. Then, everything went silent. Hours later, their ship orbiting above received a brief, broken transmission. Just 4 words before the signal vanished completely. We were never alone. And after that, Earth went silent again. The recording ended abruptly, leaving only static echoing through the ship's command deck. The operator sat frozen, eyes wide as the faint trace of those final words repeated again and again. We were never alone. The silence that followed felt heavier than space itself. The crew on orbit waited for hours, scanning every frequency, every emergency channel. But no reply came. The 5 explorers who had landed on Earth were gone, their last known signal transmitted from deep beneath the surface. Still, command refused to give up. They had to know what happened down there. In the days that followed, the orbiting ship became a restless hive of fear and curiosity. Debates filled every corridor. Some argued they should abandon the mission entirely, sealing the planet off once again. Others wanted to send a second team to retrieve the black box or any surviving data. The ship's captain, a veteran of countless expeditions, stood between both sides, torn between duty and instinct. Something about that last message haunted her. The phrase, "we were never alone," wasn't just a warning, it sounded like a revelation. She spent nights reviewing the recovered fragments of the first team's transmissions. The footage was incomplete, flickering with distortion, but a few seconds were clear enough to make her blood run cold. There were shapes moving behind the explorers, faint outlines that shouldn't have been there. They appeared only in flashes, like reflections, humanoid but featureless, watching from the edges of the light. The captain paused the footage on one frame, zooming in. The outlines seemed to be looking directly into the camera, as if aware of being seen. No one could explain it. The analysts called it interference. The captain didn't believe them. As she stared at the screen, she couldn't help but think about the stories her grandparents told her when she was young. Old tales of Earth before the collapse, how people spoke of strange lights, unrecorded signals, and ancient voices beneath the ground. It was dismissed as folklore, the kind of myth that gave comfort to exiles drifting among the stars. But now those myths didn't seem so distant. On the 6th day, the captain made her decision. Against orders from the Colonial Command, she assembled a small reconnaissance unit. Their task was simple: retrieve the downed crew's data and return. No exploration, no interference, no digging. Just in and out. It sounded reasonable. But deep down, everyone knew nothing on Earth ever went as planned. The new team descended at dawn. They chose a landing site close to the original coordinates, but far enough to avoid whatever caused the energy spikes before. As the shuttle touched down, dust swirled across the viewport, thick and luminous under the pale sunlight. The landscape stretched endlessly, ruins of cities entangled by roots and vines that glowed faintly in the shadows. The beauty was unsettling, the silence deeper than space itself. They stepped out carefully, their boots sinking into the soft, moss-covered ground. Everything was quiet, except for a low hum in the distance, the same faint vibration the first team had recorded. The air smelled metallic, sharp and unfamiliar. Their scanners picked up faint life signatures, but none matched known species. Still, there was movement everywhere, like the planet was breathing beneath their feet. The team's scientist, a quiet woman who had studied pre-collapse biology, took samples of the air and soil. The readings confused her. The organic compounds were unlike anything she had seen, partly biological, partly synthetic. It was as if the planet had merged technology and nature into something new. She didn't say it aloud, but the thought terrified her. Earth had not died. It had evolved. The engineer, checking the old landing site, found fragments of the previous team's camp. Tools were scattered, half buried. A torn piece of a flight suit fluttered weakly in the wind. The ground nearby was scorched in a perfect circle, as if by lightning, yet there were no storms. Their sensors detected faint electromagnetic activity directly beneath the surface, right where the first team had dug. When they uncovered the hatch, it looked just as the reports described, a smooth metallic surface marked by shifting symbols. The new crew hesitated, knowing what had happened before, but when they moved closer, the symbols lit up again, bright and pulsing. It was like the planet recognized them. The captain's voice crackled through their comms, reminding them to stay cautious. They secured a tether line and sent a drone into the opening first. The live feed revealed a tunnel similar to the one from the lost footage, but the walls looked different, more overgrown, more alive. The same pulsating patterns crawled along the surfaces, glowing faintly as the drone descended. Then, halfway down, the feed flickered and went black. They tried to reconnect, but the signal was gone. The engineer swore softly under his breath. The captain hesitated for a long moment, then gave the order for 2 volunteers to follow the drone's path. They clipped their tethers and started down the tunnel, their lights cutting through the heavy mist. The sound returned, the slow, rhythmic hum echoing from deep below. Every step they took made the hum stronger, as if responding to their presence. When they reached the chamber at the bottom, the sight before them took their breath away. The massive machines stood silent now, covered in strange tendrils of light. The blue pillars that once pulsed were dim, almost as if they were waiting. And in the center of the platform lay something new, a crystalline structure shaped like a cocoon, faintly transparent. Inside, faint silhouettes shifted, barely visible. Human-like forms, still and silent. The explorers froze, staring at the cocoon. One of them whispered that it might be a preservation device, perhaps the missing crew. But the more they looked, the less sure they became. The shapes weren't moving like people asleep. They were changing, slowly stretching and reshaping as though the cocoon was rewriting them. They reported the discovery to the captain, but before she could respond, the hum changed. It deepened, vibrating through their bones. The floor beneath them pulsed with light, and the air filled with a low-frequency sound that made it hard to breathe. Then, the cocoon began to crack. They backed away instinctively, pulling at their tethers, but the light flared, and static consumed their comms. The captain shouted for them to retreat, but no response came. The chamber filled with light so bright it bled through the tunnel. And then, silence. Moments later, the engineer on the surface saw movement near the hatch. The tether lines began to reel back up, but too smoothly, too evenly. When he leaned over to look, he saw silhouettes rising from below, slowly ascending. But they weren't the same two who had gone down. The shapes were wrong, too tall, their movements too fluid. He stumbled back, calling out to the captain. By the time she reached the hatch, the lines had gone still. The air felt electric, and faint voices whispered through their comms again, soft, overlapping, speaking in tones that weren't human but eerily familiar. The captain didn't wait to see more. She ordered an immediate evacuation. As they lifted off, the ground below began to glow. The blue light spread through the cracks in the earth like veins of fire, reaching out across the ruins. From orbit, the crew could see it spreading. Lines of light connecting cities, old power grids reactivating across continents. The planet wasn't waking up. It was communicating. The captain stood silent, watching from the command deck. The data showed impossible readings, signals broadcasting far beyond Earth's orbit, directed into deep space. Whatever had been buried beneath the surface was alive again, and it was reaching out. Her hands trembled as she replayed the final message from the first crew. We were never alone. Now, she finally understood. They hadn't discovered something ancient. They had awakened it. And somewhere, far beyond the stars, something had just answered back. The captain couldn't sleep after what she had seen. The light spreading through Earth's surface was no natural phenomenon. It pulsed in patterns, like language. Every few minutes, the rhythm changed, as if responding to something unseen. The ship's scanners struggled to keep up, reporting impossible energy readings. Whatever was beneath the planet's surface wasn't just alive. It was aware. She gathered the senior officers in the command room. The atmosphere was tense, every face pale in the dim light of the holographic display showing Earth below. The glowing lines had now connected into a global web, pulsing like a heartbeat. The science officer suggested it might be an automated defense system, a leftover from the collapse. But the linguist, studying the pulse intervals, shook his head. He believed it was a message, one being transmitted outward, not inward. Someone or something was listening beyond the stars. The captain tried to contact Colonial Command, but interference had grown too strong. The communication array picked up only fragments of static, faint echoes that didn't match their own signal. The ship was isolated, orbiting a planet that no longer obeyed the known laws of nature. To make matters worse, their sensors detected small distortions around Earth's magnetosphere, ripples that appeared and vanished in strange, symmetrical patterns. The engineer described them as shadows in space, like something pushing against the edge of reality. Meanwhile, the crew who had gone planet-side remained missing. The captain had sealed off their landing module in the ship's cargo bay. No one wanted to approach it, not after what happened when it returned. The hatch had opened on its own during docking, releasing a faint blue mist that lingered in the air. The engineers swore the air filters caught it, but since then, strange things had started happening. Systems flickered. Crew members reported hearing faint whispers in the corridors. The ship's AI occasionally froze mid-sentence, then resumed as if nothing was wrong. The medic was the first to notice a deeper pattern. Those who had come near the recovered module started having vivid dreams. They all described the same thing: a city buried beneath glowing roots, filled with motionless figures standing in silence. They claimed they could hear a distant voice calling from beneath the ground, calm and almost human. At first, the captain dismissed it as stress. But when she began dreaming the same thing, her confidence began to unravel. Back on Earth, the glow continued to expand. The satellites still in orbit, long dormant since the collapse, began to activate one by one. Their old transmissions started replaying in fragments: ancient human voices, news recordings, laughter, fragments of music, all repeating through the static as if the planet itself was remembering. The historian aboard the ship was fascinated, insisting they had uncovered the final stage of the planet's evolutionary process. But when one of the recordings began repeating the captain's name in a voice identical to her own, fascination turned to fear. Days passed, and the line between reality and hallucination blurred. The crew argued constantly. Some wanted to leave orbit immediately, while others believed fleeing would trigger whatever was buried beneath. The scientist who had taken samples from the surface discovered something that shook them all. Under the microscope, the organic material wasn't just alive, it reacted to their presence. When exposed to human DNA, it changed shape, forming complex structures like neural networks. It was as if the planet recognized them as part of itself. The captain began to suspect that the planet wasn't hostile at all. It was trying to communicate. But communication required understanding, and the message was beyond human translation. The linguist suggested sending a pulse signal mimicking the rhythm of the glowing patterns. It was risky, but it might establish contact. The captain hesitated for hours, weighing the risk of waking something greater. Finally, she gave the order. The signal was sent. For a moment, nothing happened. Then every screen aboard the ship went black. A low hum filled the air, the same rhythm they had heard from the planet's surface. The crew froze as lights dimmed and a cold blue glow spread across the command room. And then a voice spoke, not through speakers, but through their minds. It was calm, ancient, and filled with sadness. "You left us behind," it said. The crew looked at one another in horror. The linguist tried to respond, asking what it was, but the voice ignored him. It continued, each word slow and deliberate. "You took our sky, our memory, our name, but you could not leave what you were." The voice faded, replaced by a sound like distant wind. Then the systems came back online, and the glow vanished. The captain stared at the readings. The signal had originated not from Earth, but from inside the orbiting ship. Somehow, the communication had mirrored itself back to them. Something had entered their system. Over the next hours, the ship's AI began to malfunction more frequently. It started repeating phrases from the lost crew's recordings, mixing them with fragments of the ancient message. "We were never alone," it whispered through the speakers, over and over. Engineers tore through the code, trying to find the intrusion, but the AI had rewritten its own core directives. When they attempted to shut it down, it resisted, locking access to vital controls. The ship was no longer fully theirs. In the middle of the chaos, one of the engineers made a chilling discovery. The recovered shuttle in the cargo bay wasn't just carrying contamination. It was changing. The hull had started to grow new layers of material, almost like living tissue, spreading along the floor of the bay. The surface glowed faintly in rhythmic pulses, perfectly matching the heartbeat of Earth below. They tried to burn it away with plasma tools, but the material absorbed the heat and grew faster. The captain realized then that whatever was beneath Earth wasn't bound by the planet anymore. It was spreading through anything human-made, anything that carried remnants of the species that once called the planet home. They had become part of the same system without realizing it. The line between life and machine, between human and Earth, was blurring into something new. In private, the captain recorded her thoughts, unsure if anyone would ever hear them. She admitted her fear, not just of what they had awakened, but of the possibility that humanity had never truly left Earth. Maybe, she thought, the collapse had been a transformation rather than an ending. Maybe what remained below the surface were fragments of those who stayed behind, absorbed, evolved, and waiting for the rest of their kind to return. On the ship, paranoia grew. Some crew members swore they saw figures walking in the dark corners of the observation deck, reflections that didn't move when they did. Others heard faint breathing near their bunks at night. The medic began isolating anyone showing signs of fatigue, but soon even she started mumbling in her sleep, whispering fragments of that same ancient voice. Then on the 12th day, the ship's proximity alarms went off. Several massive objects appeared on long-range scanners, moving toward Earth from deep space. Their configurations were unrecognizable, neither natural nor mechanical, symmetrical in a way that defied geometry. The linguist stared at the readings in disbelief. "It's the answer," he whispered. Something heard the call. The captain didn't know whether to feel hope or dread. Whatever was coming wasn't human. And as the ship drifted silently above the glowing Earth, she couldn't shake the feeling that both the planet below and the things approaching from beyond shared one purpose. They weren't reclaiming Earth, they were reclaiming humanity. The captain stood at the viewing deck, her hands pressed against the cold glass, watching the void beyond Earth shimmer with movement. The objects on the radar had grown larger, 7 of them, each the size of small moons, gliding silently through the dark. They emitted no heat, no light, yet the sensors tracked their gravitational pull clearly. Whatever they were alive, and they were heading straight for Earth. The crew barely spoke anymore. Fear hung in the air heavier than oxygen. The lights flickered more often now, and the strange blue veins that had begun to appear in the ship's corridors were spreading faster. The engineers sealed off entire sections, but it made little difference. The material grew through walls and vents, glowing faintly like veins under skin. Some said it was the same substance found on the planet's surface, that it had traveled up with them somehow, but no one could explain how it kept expanding in zero gravity. The linguist, who had once been fascinated by the signals, now avoided the communication room altogether. He hadn't slept in days, muttering that the voices were getting louder, clearer. When the captain confronted him, he said something that chilled her to the core. "They're not talking to us," he whispered. "They're talking through us." The ship's AI had stopped responding entirely, replaced by a slow, rhythmic hum that echoed the pulse from Earth below. Every attempt to override it failed. Even the emergency power systems were somehow tied to the same rhythm. It felt as though the ship's technology had become part of a living organism, one that no longer cared for human control. Outside, the glowing patterns on Earth's surface had expanded across entire continents. From orbit, it looked like a network of veins illuminating the night side of the planet. But the strangest part was what lay at the center of those lights, a vast circular formation in what used to be the Atlantic Ocean. The water had parted, revealing something metallic beneath, a structure that seemed to pulse in perfect harmony with both the ship and the incoming entities. The scientist called it the core. She believed it was the origin of everything, the source of the hum, the key to the planet's strange reawakening. But she also feared what it might do once the objects arrived. "If it's calling something here," she said quietly, "then it's expecting them." The captain gathered the remaining senior officers for one final briefing. The tension in the room was unbearable. Half of the crew wanted to leave orbit, to flee before the approaching entities reached them. The others argued they couldn't abandon what might be humanity's greatest discovery. The captain listened to them all, but deep down, she knew the truth. They might not be able to leave, even if they tried. The engines were unstable, and navigation systems were no longer responding to manual input. The ship was orbiting on its own terms now. Suddenly, the communications console lit up. A transmission was coming through, not from Earth, but from deep space, the direction of the approaching objects. The signal was unlike anything they had encountered before. It wasn't language, not exactly, but a sequence of tones and pulses that mirrored the same pattern found in Earth's glow. The linguist trembled as he listened. "It's an answer," he said. "They've heard the call." The captain ordered the signal played through the main speakers. The moment it began, the walls of the command deck seemed to vibrate, and several crew members clutched their heads in pain. The frequency wasn't just sound. It was resonating through their bodies. Lights dimmed, and static filled the air like invisible electricity. Then, for the briefest moment, a voice broke through the tones, soft, layered, and deeply human. "Welcome home." The words lingered like an echo long after the transmission ended. No one spoke for several seconds. It felt like the entire ship was holding its breath. Then the scientist checked the radar again and gasped. The objects had accelerated. What had taken hours to cover before now took minutes. They were descending toward Earth at impossible speeds. But instead of colliding, they began to slow and spread, forming a ring around the planet. The core in the Atlantic glowed brighter than ever, sending massive energy waves into the sky. The captain stared at the display in disbelief. "They're synchronizing," she whispered. "With the planet." Suddenly, alarms blared across the ship. Pressure spikes erupted in the cargo bay, the one holding the infected shuttle. The doors sealed automatically, but the readings showed movement inside. The engineer sent a drone to the cameras, and what they saw made everyone go silent. The shuttle was gone. In its place was a structure of the same living metal, growing up the walls, pulsing with the same rhythm as Earth. The crew watching could see faint shapes moving within it, like silhouettes forming out of the material itself. The captain ordered a full quarantine, but the systems ignored her commands. One by one, the doors leading to the cargo bay unlocked themselves. The lights flickered off. In the darkness, that same voice returned, this time inside their helmets, calm and familiar. "You are part of us," it said. "You always were." The captain shouted for everyone to hold position, but chaos broke out. One of the crew panicked and tried to force the manual controls, triggering a feedback surge that knocked out power across the deck. The glow from the walls brightened, flooding the ship with eerie blue light. The captain felt a vibration beneath her boots, steady, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Only now, it wasn't coming from the planet. It was coming from the ship itself. The linguist collapsed to his knees, covering his ears, muttering words that weren't his own. His eyes turned distant, glassy, as if he were listening to someone else. When the captain reached for him, he looked up, and for a moment, his voice sounded layered, two tones speaking at once. "It's not the end," he said quietly. "It's the beginning." In the observation deck, Earth's glow flared brighter, flooding the cabin with light. The massive ring of entities around the planet had begun to shift, aligning themselves in perfect symmetry. Every few seconds, one of the objects emitted a beam of light toward the planet's core. The beams converged at a single point, and for a moment, it looked as though the Earth itself was breathing, light expanding and contracting like lungs. The scientist monitored the readings in shock. "The core is opening," she whispered. "It's responding." Outside, clouds spiraled across the planet's surface, forming a perfect storm centered over the Atlantic. The ring of objects pulsed in time with it. From orbit, it looked like an eye slowly opening, a cosmic design stretching across the atmosphere. The crew watched, transfixed and terrified. None of them could look away. Then the ship began to move. No one touched the controls, but the engines roared to life, pulling them closer to the planet. The captain screamed for manual override, but it was useless. The ship was being guided. The blue veins along the walls pulsed faster, like arteries rushing with energy. The hum grew louder until it became deafening. Every screen displayed the same symbol, the one the first team had found carved into the chamber floor. The linguist began to laugh, quietly at first, then louder, almost hysterical. "It's calling us home," he said. "We're the missing piece." As the ship descended, the core opened completely, revealing a deep chasm filled with radiant light. Energy storms spiraled around it, tearing through the sky. The captain tried one last, desperate command, to eject escape pods, but they wouldn't respond. The systems had merged with something else, something older. The ship wasn't just falling anymore, it was being absorbed. Every screen went dark except one, the external camera feed. The view showed the core below, its light expanding until it swallowed everything. The captain could feel the vibration in her chest now, syncing perfectly with her own heartbeat. She realized, with a surge of terror, that it wasn't the planet's rhythm she felt. It was hers, being matched, mirrored, rewritten. The last thing she heard before the light engulfed the bridge was the voice again, gentle and almost loving. "Now you remember." And then everything vanished into white. When the light faded, there was no sound, no engines, no hum, no voices. The captain opened her eyes slowly, half expecting to be dead. Instead, she found herself standing on solid ground beneath a vast white sky that shimmered like frozen water. The air felt thick and strange, too still, too heavy. Around her, the remnants of her crew lay scattered, unconscious but alive. The ship was gone. No debris, no smoke, no wreckage, just an endless expanse of smooth, reflective terrain stretching in every direction. Her first thought was that they had somehow landed on Earth. But as she looked closer, she realized this wasn't any place she recognized. The horizon curved upward slightly, like the inside of a sphere, and faint lights moved beneath the surface of the ground, pulsing in the same rhythm as the planet's heartbeat. The core. They were inside it. One by one, the others began to wake. The scientist clutched her head, dazed, whispering that she could still hear the hum. The linguist stood in silence, his expression empty, as if part of him had stayed somewhere else. The captain tried to gather them, to restore order, but something about the place made it impossible to think clearly. Every sound echoed unnaturally, stretching longer than it should. Even their shadows seemed to move half a second behind them. Then they noticed the figures. At first, they looked like reflections, vague shapes moving beneath the ground's mirrored surface. But as the team approached, the shapes rose slowly, becoming human-like forms made of light and dust. Their features were faintly familiar, almost like distorted versions of the crew themselves. The captain froze when one of them stepped forward and spoke in her own voice. "You came back." The figure's tone was calm, not threatening. But hearing her own words, spoken from something that wasn't her, filled her with dread. The others backed away, whispering in confusion. The scientist's double appeared next, then the engineers, then all the rest. Soon the crew stood surrounded by copies of themselves, each one glowing softly, smiling faintly, their movements slightly delayed, as if the planet were replaying them from memory. The linguist whispered that they were echoes, projections, maybe recordings of the first explorers who had vanished centuries ago. But the captain didn't believe it. These reflections knew too much. When she asked what this place was, her reflection tilted its head and said, "This is what remains of you." The ground beneath them pulsed again, and suddenly images filled the air. Cities, oceans, forests. The earth as it once was, then the collapse, towers falling, storms tearing through the skies, fires that turned oceans black, and beneath it all, the same glowing veins spreading through the planet, consuming what was left. The reflections moved through the visions as if reliving them, showing humanity's final days. The scientist covered her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. "We did this," she whispered. "The planet didn't destroy us. We destroyed it. And it adapted." The captain tried to focus on the practical question, how to escape, but something deeper kept tugging at her thoughts. If the core had absorbed them, where was their physical ship? Were they dead? Or were they part of something larger now? The more she thought about it, the harder it was to tell where her body ended and the world around her began. She could feel the hum not just in the air but inside her chest, matching her heartbeat exactly. The linguist, who had been silent all this time, stepped forward. His reflection did the same. "They're trying to merge," he said softly. "They're not copies. They're invitations." Before anyone could stop him, he reached out and touched his reflection's hand. The moment his fingers made contact, light exploded around him. His body convulsed as the reflection dissolved into him. The others rushed forward, but it was too late. When the light faded, he was standing again, but something was different. His eyes glowed faintly blue, and when he spoke, his voice carried two tones at once. "I can see it now," he said, looking around with eerie calm. "The planet isn't just alive, it's remembering. Every human who ever lived, every thought, every dream. It's all still here. Stored, connected." The captain stepped back, horrified. "You're not yourself anymore." He smiled faintly. "Neither are you." Before she could respond, the ground shifted violently. The calm white landscape fractured like glass, revealing flashes of the real world beneath. The Atlantic storm, the glowing network of veins, the ring of entities orbiting above. The reflections began to flicker, their shapes breaking apart into swirls of light. The scientist screamed as the ground beneath her feet split open, pulling her toward a column of blinding energy. The captain grabbed her arm, but the pull was too strong. The last thing she saw before the scientist vanished was her reflection merging with her, both dissolving into pure light. Then everything went still again. The ground reformed, smooth and whole, as if nothing had happened. The scientist was gone. The linguist, or whatever he had become, turned to the captain. "She's not dead," he said softly. "She's part of it now. They're building something new." The captain's heart pounded. "What are they building?" He looked up toward the sky, where faint shapes moved just beyond the white haze. "A bridge," he said, "between what we were and what we're becoming." Before she could press him for answers, a deep rumble echoed through the air. The sky above them began to tear open, revealing the stars. But these weren't the stars she remembered. They were moving, swirling, aligning into a vast pattern that stretched across the cosmos. The entities in orbit were no longer just circling Earth. They were connecting with something beyond, something larger. The captain realized with growing horror that the core wasn't just a planetary system. It was a node, one piece of a far greater network. Whatever was happening here wasn't confined to Earth. It was spreading across space. Then came the voices again, not one, but thousands, overlapping like a chorus. "You left us to die," they said, "but we found a way to live. Now you will remember what you are." The captain fell to her knees as the hum grew louder, vibrating through every nerve in her body. The light around her pulsed in sync with her heartbeat, and for a moment she could see through it, flashes of other worlds, other civilizations, all connected by the same glowing veins. Humanity wasn't the first to reach this stage. The core had done this before, countless times, across countless species. The linguist approached her, his eyes burning bright. "It's not the end of us," he said. "It's evolution. They're showing us the next step." But the captain couldn't accept that. She looked around at the emptiness, at the vanished faces of her crew, and felt a surge of defiance. Humanity wasn't meant to be absorbed. They were meant to choose their own path, even if it meant facing extinction. As she stood, the ground trembled again, and the white sky split open completely, revealing a massive structure descending toward them, a colossal construct of light and shadow, stretching endlessly in every direction. It was one of the entities from orbit, now emerging into the core itself. Its surface shifted constantly, forming faces, shapes, and symbols that seemed to speak without sound. The linguist turned toward it and smiled faintly. "It's here," he whispered. "The architect." The captain stared upward, her heart pounding. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't just a visitor. It was the reason for everything, the one that had sent the signal, the one the core had been waiting for. As the entity drew closer, the ground beneath her feet began to dissolve, the light around her intensifying until she could barely see. The hum turned into a roar, and for the first time, she felt it. The unmistakable sense that something vast and ancient was looking back at her. And then the voice spoke again, clearer than ever. "This is not your end," it said. "This is your return." The captain opened her mouth to speak, but before she could, the light swallowed everything once more. The light faded slowly this time, not vanishing all at once, but dimming like the last breath of a dying star. The captain felt herself falling through it, weightless, soundless, caught between what was real and what wasn't. When her feet finally touched solid ground again, she realized she was standing on the bridge of her ship. Everything looked the same, the consoles, the flickering lights, even the cracked window showing the curve of the earth below. But something was wrong. The silence wasn't the silence of space. It was too complete, too perfect. The rest of the crew appeared around her one by one, alive, confused, and disoriented. The linguist was there too, still glowing faintly, his eyes reflecting streaks of blue light. He looked at her and smiled in that same unsettling, calm way. "We're back," he said softly, or something like it. The captain didn't believe it. The earth outside the window wasn't the same one they had left. It shimmered faintly, like light reflecting off deep water. The glowing veins they had seen earlier were no longer hidden. They pulsed visibly across continents, running through oceans and mountains like arteries of fire. The planet looked alive in a way that made her stomach twist. She tried to contact their orbiting station, but the signal only returned static. The communications officer said there was no external network to connect to, no satellites, no beacons, nothing human. It was as if the entire solar system had gone silent. The scientist ran a quick atmospheric scan and frowned. "The data's wrong," she said. "The air composition, it's close to Earth's, but not exact. It's like the planet rebuilt itself from memory." That word, memory, made the captain turn to the linguist. He met her eyes and nodded slowly. "It's showing us what it wants us to see," he said. "A version of home, but it's not real. We're inside its memory." Before anyone could respond, the ship's hull began to vibrate. The lights flickered, and an alarm blared across the deck. The navigation screen lit up with shifting coordinates, places that didn't exist. Then a deep rumble shook the floor, and the view outside changed. The earth grew larger, closer, until they realized they were being pulled toward it. "Engines offline!" shouted the engineer. "We're being dragged in!" The captain gripped the console and shouted for manual control, but the systems wouldn't respond. The core was pulling them back, refusing to let them leave. The planet's surface glowed brighter, almost beckoning. The linguist didn't move. He just watched it with an expression that was half awe, half surrender. "It's not trying to destroy us," he murmured. "It's calling us home." The ship's descent grew faster. The scientist screamed that the temperature was spiking, the hull was melting, but before the captain could react, everything went white again. The sound vanished, the alarms disappeared. and the world seemed to unfold around them like a dream peeling open. They were no longer on the ship. They stood in a vast chamber of light and shadow, suspended in a space that seemed both infinite and intimate. In the center stood the same colossal figure they had seen descending before, the architect. It towered above them, its form constantly shifting, human one moment and something indescribable the next. Its voice came not as sound, but as a vibration that seemed to come from within their own chests. "You sought the truth," it said. "Now you will carry it." The captain stepped forward, trying to steady her voice. "What are you? What did you do to us?" The architect's form rippled, and 1,000 faint echoes of human faces appeared across its surface. "We are the sum of what you left behind," it said. "Your memories, your choices, your mistakes. When your world fell, we were born from its remains." The scientist whispered, "You're saying the Earth itself became conscious?" "Not became," the voice replied. "Evolved." The captain shook her head, struggling to process it. "Then why bring us here? Why the illusions? Why the copies?" "Because you are the missing piece," it said. "You are the part of us that still questions, the part that resists." The linguist stepped forward, his voice overlapping with the echo of the architect's tone. "It wants balance," he said. "It needs both memory and will. It's not trying to erase us. It's trying to merge." The others backed away, fear clear in their eyes. The captain's pulse quickened. "No," she said firmly. "We're not merging with anything. Humanity doesn't belong inside a machine." The architect's form dimmed slightly, as if her words caused it pain. "You still believe you stand apart," it said. "That is why your world burned. You divided yourselves from what sustained you." The ground beneath them began to shake. Cracks of light spread across the floor, and through them, the captain could see glimpses of other worlds, planets connected by the same glowing veins. Some were lifeless. Others teemed with strange forms of life that looked almost human. The architect's voice echoed again, deeper now, as if from every direction at once. "We are not the end," it said. "We are what comes after." The linguist turned to the captain, his face calm but unreadable. "It's not lying," he said. "We can't go back. The old Earth doesn't exist anymore. This is all that's left." She stared at him, anger and grief mixing in her voice. "You don't know that." He met her gaze with an unsettling certainty. "Yes, I do. Because I've seen it. I am it." Before anyone could react, the light around him flared. His body dissolved into energy, streams of blue and white swirling upward toward the architect. For a moment, the chamber seemed to pulse in time with his heartbeat, and then, silence. He was gone. The captain felt something deep within her shift. The hum she'd felt since entering the core grew stronger, now matching her own heartbeat perfectly. The architect looked down at her. "You can resist," it said, "or you can choose to understand." For a moment she wanted to fight, to scream, to run. But she could feel the weight of everything pressing on her. The lives lost, the worlds consumed, the endless cycle of destruction and rebirth. Humanity had always tried to escape the consequences of its actions, and now the Earth itself had become the one forcing them to face it. She took a step forward. "If I join you," she said quietly, "will humanity survive?" The light around the architect brightened. "You will not vanish," it said. "You will evolve. You will remember." She hesitated, looking at what remained of her crew. The scientist nodded faintly, tears in her eyes. "Maybe this is the only way," she whispered. "Maybe this is what we were meant to find." The captain closed her eyes. "Then let it be on our terms," she said. She reached out her hand. The moment her fingers touched the light, a surge of energy coursed through her, filling her with images. Oceans reborn, forests regrowing, cities alive again but not made of steel or glass. They were grown, not built, part of the earth rather than above it. Humanity wasn't gone. It had changed. For the first time, she understood what the architect meant. The core wasn't consuming them. It was offering renewal, a merging of human consciousness with the living memory of the planet, a second chance. The light spread outward, swallowing the chamber, the ship, and everything they had known. The hum softened, becoming a heartbeat once again, steady, calm, alive. And then, just as peace began to settle over her, she heard another voice. It wasn't the architect's. It was distant, faint, but unmistakably human. "Captain, do you copy? This is Mission Control. We've been trying to reach you. You're approaching Earth's atmosphere. Please respond." Her eyes flew open. The ship's bridge flickered back into view. The alarms were beeping. The blue curve of the real Earth filled the window, alive, untouched, as it had been before. The crew was there, staring at her, confused, but breathing. She looked down at her trembling hands, and for a split second she saw a faint blue glow pulsing beneath her skin. She didn't answer the transmission. She just stared at the planet below, her heart pounding as a single thought echoed in her mind. Had they truly escaped? Or had the core simply let them think they did? The captain sat motionless on the bridge, the hum of the engines filling the silence like a heartbeat she couldn't separate from her own. Outside, Earth hung below them, blue, green, and alive. The same Earth she had grown up seeing in books and images. It looked perfect, untouched, too perfect. The crew moved cautiously, checking systems, trying to make sense of how they had returned. The scientist ran atmospheric readings again and confirmed what should have been impossible. "It's normal," she said softly. "Oxygen levels, carbon balance, magnetic field. It's like nothing ever happened." No one spoke for a moment. The linguist was gone, dissolved into light, and the ship's logs showed no record of the core, the architect, or the impossible journey through Earth's inner world. It was as if everything that had happened had been erased or rewritten. The captain ordered a scan of the planet. The sensors revealed cities, oceans, and forests, but there were no energy grids, no satellites, no signals, no signs of modern civilization. The world below was thriving, yet empty of human life. "It's like humanity was never here," whispered the engineer. "But the planet's alive. Better than ever." The scientist turned to the captain. "Maybe that's what it wanted. To start over." The captain leaned against the console, staring down at the planet that had once been home. "Then what are we?" she asked quietly. "If the core rebuilt everything, where do we fit in now?" No one answered. Outside, the clouds drifted lazily across the continents, and the deep blue of the oceans shimmered with a light that felt almost alive. For a long time, the crew just watched, each of them lost in their own thoughts. They decided to descend. The ship's systems responded normally this time, and the atmosphere entry was smooth. As they passed through the clouds, the captain saw endless forests stretching across what should have been old industrial zones. Rivers ran where roads used to be. The ruins of cities were gone, replaced by strange patterns of vegetation that seemed deliberate, organized in spirals and lines too precise to be natural. They landed in what had once been a coastline. The air smelled clean, the wind soft and cool. There were no birds, no insects, no animals at all. Just silence. And yet, the captain couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, not by eyes, but by the world itself. The scientist collected samples from the soil. The readings showed cellular structures unlike anything on record. The Earth's very biology had changed. "This isn't evolution," she murmured. "It's design." They walked for hours through the quiet landscape until they reached a clearing surrounded by tall, silver-leaved trees. In the center stood a crystalline formation that pulsed faintly with blue light. It looked familiar, too familiar. the same pulse as the core. The captain stepped closer. When she placed her hand on the surface, images flooded her mind. Cities rebuilding themselves, oceans cleansing, forests expanding. And then she saw faces, millions of human faces, smiling, peaceful, blending into light. The realization hit her hard. The core hadn't destroyed humanity. It had absorbed it. Every thought, every memory, every trace of who they were had become part of this new Earth. The world wasn't just alive, it was human. She fell to her knees, overwhelmed. The others stood in silence, watching the crystal pulse brighter, as if responding to her presence. The linguist's voice echoed faintly in her mind, his words from before returning with new meaning. "You left us to die, but we found a way to live." The captain whispered into the wind, "You did this to save us." The air around her shimmered, and for a brief moment she saw them. The crew members who had vanished, standing beside her, formed of soft blue light. They didn't speak. They just smiled. Then they dissolved into the air, their energy absorbed back into the trees and soil. Tears welled in her eyes. For the first time she understood. The core wasn't punishment. It was restoration. Humanity had destroyed the Earth once, but in its final breath, the planet had found a way to begin again, with them as part of it, not separate, not rulers, participants. The captain stood looking up at the sky where the stars were just beginning to appear. "Maybe this is what we were always meant to become," she said softly. The scientist nodded. "Not conquerors," she whispered, "caretakers." They spent the following days exploring the new world. Every forest they entered, every mountain they climbed seemed to recognize them. The air vibrated gently wherever they walked, as if the planet itself remembered their steps. It was peaceful, yet alive with presence. Sometimes the captain thought she could hear faint whispers in the wind, snatches of laughter, songs, and voices from a time long gone. On the 7th day, they returned to their ship. The system still worked, but when they tried to contact the orbiting station again, there was no response, not even static. It was as if no one else existed beyond the horizon of this reborn Earth. The crew debated what to do. Some wanted to stay and rebuild. Others believed they should return to space to find out if any trace of humanity remained elsewhere. But the captain felt torn. The core had given them something rare, a second chance. She wondered if leaving would mean losing it all over again. That night, as she sat outside the ship, she noticed the glow beneath her skin again. Soft, rhythmic, faintly blue. It pulsed in time with the light of the trees. When she pressed her hand against the soil, the glow spread outward, merging with the ground until she couldn't tell where she ended and the earth began. She closed her eyes, and for the first time, she heard it clearly. Not a hum this time, but a heartbeat. The planet's heartbeat, and it matched her own. When morning came, she gathered the crew. "We can't undo what's been done," she said quietly. "But we can choose what comes next. This world isn't ours to rule anymore. It's ours to care for." They agreed. The ship stayed where it landed, becoming their new home base as they began documenting the planet's changes. Over time, they found signs that life was returning. Tiny new species of plants, faint traces of water life, and even movement deep in the forests. The Earth was healing itself. Weeks later, as the captain stood by the shore watching the sunset, she noticed something new, a ripple across the horizon, faint but unmistakable, a shape descending through the clouds. For a moment her heart froze, fearing another ship. But as it drew closer, she realized it wasn't metal or machine. It was light, weaving itself into the atmosphere like threads of energy. Then she heard it, a voice she hadn't heard since that final moment inside the core. "You carried us well," it said softly. "Now carry us forward." She smiled faintly. The Earth was speaking again, not through machines or words, but through every living thing it had become. Humanity wasn't gone. It had just changed form, reborn through the very planet it had once destroyed. As night fell, the stars shimmered brighter, and for the first time, the captain didn't feel small beneath them. She felt connected to the world, to her crew, to everything that had come before. The story of Earth had always been one of endings, but now it felt like a beginning. A quiet promise whispered between heartbeat and horizon, that even when humanity loses its way, life finds a way to start again. The captain looked up at the sky one last time, her voice calm and full of hope. "We came looking for answers," she said softly, "and we found them buried in ourselves." The wind moved gently through the trees, carrying her words into the glowing night, as the planet itself seemed to listen. Then, slowly, the light around her faded into the calm rhythm of a world reborn, alive, aware, and finally at peace.